morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. First of all, I am so glad to be back. A week away from me last week. I thought a great collection of shows we put together for you while I was gone. But it's fun to be back here live, especially when the content is as rich and deep as it is today. Coming off a G-Day where I thought a lot of stuff was on display, some of it meaningful, perhaps maybe some of it not quite so much so. Some of it answering our questions for this fall, maybe in some cases not all of those questions getting answered. But one really big takeaway overall that I think you have to mention off the top of the program. We're going to give you a lot from Kirby Smart on that before we're done today. You'll have a chance to make fun of me if you would like. Some have. We'll let our Kaylee Manziel kind of weigh in on how fair some of that is based on a performance from me this past weekend. We'll get to that. Jon Stinchcomb's here today. I think that Kirby Smart made a very kind of bold, overarching statement on Saturday about what he wants to see from his team in 2025. And in a roundabout way, I think that tells us something about his team from 2024. We'll talk about that. And that Nico Iamaleava situation is as fascinating as it comes. Perhaps an inflection point for needed change in college football. I'll tell you why it's not impossible to believe that could be true. All of that coming up here today. So what do you say? We get it started. We are raring to go after a week of not being here. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Man, great to be back. Fun week last week for spring break. More on that in a moment. But so awesome to be able to come back to work, sit here in this chair, do what I love, which is talking Georgia football with all of you, especially when the content coming off G-Day this past weekend just gives us so much to sink our teeth into. Now, listen, before we're done, we'll also get heavy into the Nico Iamaleava situation, obviously the biggest story in college football since I've been gone. We'll get to that here coming up in a little bit, but it's Georgia football you want to hear about, so it is Georgia football we will talk about here right now. I thought near the end of Kirby Smart's press conference on Saturday, I thought he did a really good job of kind of describing his own expectations for the event. One of the things that Kirby Smart said is, he said, listen, we're basically pass happy when it comes to G-Day. Now, we know in the SEC, you can't live sort of a pass happy lifestyle. You got to be able to run the football. You've got to be able to stop the run. That's what real football is. G-Day, and I say this as someone who loves it, and I say this as someone who genuinely enjoyed interacting with other Georgia fans on Saturday who also love this event, that even if you love it, the one thing that you will be honest about is that G-Day is not real football. It looks like real football, and so therefore it's entertaining, but it's not real football. And the thing that's sort of missing that would make it more like real football in the fall is the role that offensive and defensive lines would play in this. We'll talk to Jon Stinchcomb later on. Line of scrimmage stuff will come up. We're mostly guessing about that, though, because the kinds of big guys colliding that you see during the fall, you don't see that as much during G-Day. Georgia had several offensive linemen not able to participate due to injury. That puts a little bit of a different situation on the defensive line. Kirby Smart openly acknowledging they don't have a lot of dynamic, exotic quarterback pass pressures. They're not trying to make things very difficult on the quarterbacks. And as Kirby Smart himself said on Saturday, so therefore because of that, because we're not really dialing up exotic blitzes, because we're not, necessarily playing, the full level of physicality at the line of scrimmage the way that we would in the fall, that it's an opportunity to see, can we throw it and can we catch it? Because we are going to throw it plenty, Kirby Smart would say. Can we throw it and can we catch it? Now, there were a couple of drops from Georgia on Saturday, and yeah, there was a little bit of a slow start, reminiscent of what we've seen from Georgia, certainly a lot in 2024. We'll ask Jon Stinchcomb later on how meaningful he thought that was. But for the most part on Saturday, I thought the number one takeaway was this offense was pretty fun to watch. A little slow in getting started, not perfect in every regard, but every Georgia fan I talked to, and I talked to at least dozens, we had tens of thousands that tuned into our post-game show, but of the ones I got to talk to in person or interact with, dozens of Georgia fans, for the most part, everybody seemed to be having a pretty good time. Everybody was pretty entertained by what they saw, which leads me to sort of my key number one takeaway from the day. That if you want to put your most optimistic, positive spin on what took place, nothing being guaranteed, nothing being proven with certainty, but if you want to kind of rest on one idea coming off of G-Day, it would simply be this. There is a chance that Georgia's pass catchers, you'll combine wide receiver and tight end together here. There is a chance that Georgia's pass catching core is greatly upgraded in 2025 compared to what it was in 2024. Some of this is because of the influx of a very interesting crop of freshman wide receivers. And this year, these freshmen, because of the talent that they possess and the need that Georgia has, this year, these freshman receivers, they might get to play a little more than some freshman receivers have gotten to play in the past. And because of that, they've been maybe showcased during these spring practices and put on display on G-Day in a way they wouldn't always have been in the past. In fact, when Kirby Smart spoke on Saturday, one of the things that he revealed is he thinks that partially through necessity and partially through opportunity, this group of freshman wide receivers, they may just be further along than previous groups of freshmen have been at this difficult position to play for first-year players. This is what Kirby Smart said on Saturday.
Yeah, way further ahead. I mean, they've come a long way. They were thrown into the fire. They've been demanded to get the call, line up. I mean, they're ahead of where our typical freshmen are because they've gone with the twos. And they've got a ways to go still. They had a little anxiety today. They had a couple plays I thought they should have made, but they're a good group. And Tyler's been hurt, so we haven't been able to see him much. But that young group they've made some plays for us.
Perhaps none of this more better embodied than, did you see C.J. Wiley on Saturday? Did you like Wiley making a couple, not just catches, but I thought really contested catches? We'll kind of have a little bit more on this later on the show. I thought really kind of making some contested catches. That's one of the things that I think if you saw him in high school, you saw him have the ability to do in kind of a short field situation, short side of the field situation with a defensive back perhaps, close to him. Wiley can just go get the football. He can go up and win the battle, win the fight, and come down with it. And it's one thing to do that in high school, even against high-level competition. It's another thing to be able to sort of step in and start doing that to begin your college career. And seeing what we saw from him on G-Day, brief glimpse, but a glimpse nonetheless, seeing what we saw from him on G-Day, you're led to believe that more of that could really be possible. And on Saturday, Kirby Smart also went into a little bit more detail about some of the stuff he just described there about the fact that these freshman receivers have come a long way, maybe ahead of previous freshmen, but also at the same time, still a ways to go. Here's Kirby Smart on that same topic once again.
Excited to see some more growth, excited to see some more toughness, excited to see what they can do in the fall. The biggest thing is keeping them healthy, and I don't know what the number is, but I would bet there's 6 or 7 of them that are in their first time playing in this offense, and that takes a little time. So I thought the 6 or 7 new guys got better as the spring went on, and they got a chance to get 20-something more practices to grow even more. We're not where we need to be at wideout, but we have a good group to work with.
And, of course, when you think about wide receivers, as Kirby Smart said, some of the newcomers, not just freshmen playing college ball for the very first time anywhere, but in some cases it's also transfer players getting used to playing in Georgia. And once again, you think about specific moments from G-Day. How about a 30-plus yard catch from Zachariah Branch that set up first and goal that led to a Nate Frazier touchdown? Boy, you'd love to hear that mentioned a lot during the fall. Wouldn't that sound good to be hearing those phrases thrown around a whole bunch? Branch is a guy that we had heard plenty of praise about during spring practice. Noah Thomas, a guy that also generated his own version of buzz. And I know Noah got a little banged up during G-Day, but Branch did come down with a really big catch, in a lot of ways kind of validating what had been said about him leading into that particular scrimmage. When the game was over, Kirby went into more detail about the role that Thomas and Branch played in the offense on Saturday and the role they can play in the offense later on this fall.
They're learning the offense. I mean, kind of when I mentioned those 6 or 7, they're in that number of guys that have to continue to grow and understand. Zach missed, 2 or 3 practices that probably hurt him in terms of getting reps and understanding the offense. You can't just say, I'm going to learn it and go out there and do it. You have to rep it. You got to go out there and physically do it. And he missed, I think, 2 of the last 3 practices or 3 of the last 4 practices, and then was able to go today. But, Jacoby made some plays today, made some really nice plays, and he catches the ball well. He's athletic. Dylan went out and played and did some extra things. And, we've got, the group we have, the core group we have is really tough and physical, and we want to continue to grow everybody to be that way.
Yeah, nice shout out for Scovey White, who did have the final touchdown of the game on Saturday. But when you watch what Zachariah does, and the other names that Kirby mentions, obviously Noah Thomas, a guy that we've been hearing about and saw some of him on Saturday. I think one of the things you just can't help but take from that is, a lot of options, a lot of possibilities, and sometimes some of this, especially for a spring game, is just kind of judged by the vibes. And I just thought the vibe was really good. The Georgia fans in the stadium. Now, it was a smaller crowd than it's been before. G-Day is in a weird spot here right now. And it is undeniable that, there's not quite as much emphasis being put on this by Georgia. And so, therefore, I don't know that, frankly, Georgia fans were as aware of this event as they typically might be. I think many of them were also kind of caught off guard by the fact the game wasn't on TV, even though that's all we've been talking about for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's just kind of funny how stuff like that works. But for those who were there, you had some nice cheers going up for some catches and some highlight plays. You had some people enjoying all of that. And then if you go back and watch our post-game show from Saturday, both those that came on the air with us and those that were just sort of talking to us kind of around the broadcast there at the time, people just seem to be really entertained by this. It's a day for the offense. The offense is working when people are entertained by what they're watching. If it seems like it's fun, that means it's probably working. And I would say after a little bit of a slow start, Georgia fans, by and large, were having a good time with what they were seeing. And I credit the presence of these new receivers, some of them freshmen, some of them transfers. I'll also credit the tight ends. A guy like Lawson Lucky steps up and makes a couple of catches here, giving you an idea that that's also a player sort of ready to be a major playmaker in this Georgia offense too, at least a very depended on playmaker here in this Georgia offense. People seem to be really enjoying that. And after saying all of that, there's also a name in particular I kind of want to sort of single out in particular here for a moment. How great was it to see Colby Young back playing football for Georgia again? Now, leading into the Sugar Bowl, many of you will remember this, especially if you're a very keen observer, that we had some practice video we were able to put up from a practice we were able to attend, and Colby Young was still working with Georgia then and, caught a pass that day. I think, ironically, it was thrown by Jaden Rashada. And so, Young had been working with Georgia, but I think based on our eyewitness account, had been making plays during practice. But there is still something to be said for when you see it in a game situation like this, a reminder of what Georgia maybe could have had for a full season a year ago, what it stands to have for a full season here in 2025, and maybe still the most exciting receiver on the Georgia roster based on what we saw on Saturday might have been Young. There's the one touchdown that he initially scored that was taken away. And by the way, can I step aside here for a moment and just say credit to Georgia, because if you wanted to make the game a true showcase of the offense, you could have just let this touchdown stand. And if you were listening to it or if you're there or if you were just kind of following along with our coverage, you know what I'm talking about, is Young looked to have a nice sort of fade ball towards the sideline, going to count as a touchdown. Replay in the stadium did show him to be out of bounds. This was the correct call. It was the correct call. It's a great catch no matter what, but he was out of bounds. Georgia, if it wants to showcase its offense, make the final score look pretty, and make the fans who weren't able to be there in person feel a little bit better about what they heard about the game, they could have easily let that touchdown stand. There was no official replay process. I'm assuming this came from Kirby Smart taking that touchdown off the board. Colby Young would later get a touchdown of his own that would count. But the point is Georgia still, even though kind of G-Day's in a weird spot, we're not really sure what the long-term future of this event is. Georgia still treated it mostly like a game, including taking a touchdown off the board that, deserved to come off the board once you saw the replay rule. But either way, for both catches that did count and catches that didn't quite count, Colby Young was hauling them in on Saturday. You love to think about what he may be able to do this fall, and Kirby Smart also talked more about him after the game, too.
Yeah, he gives you problems outside. If you're going out there, there's not a lot of defense you can have for a guy that gets the ball at the highest point and goes up, and it forces, DBs to have a really good ball skill set. They've got to have great balls to the hands that go up and attack the ball and play the ball high in the air. And the ball playing skills of DBs sometimes are not that of a receiver. And Colby has made a lot of plays this spring on like those 50-50 type balls.
We certainly saw that from him on Saturday. And honestly, it's the ability to win with those kinds of plays that can do wonders for your quarterback's completion percentage and your overall offensive performance overall. And it's one of those things that Georgia was probably missing a lot of last year once Colby Young was no longer able to play. So bottom line for me is this. I had fun on Saturday. I really did. I had fun hanging out with Georgia fans. I enjoyed the weather. I enjoyed seeing something that fairly closely approximated real football. I just liked all of it. And the only thing we have a right to ask for as we kind of move into some summer months here, the only thing we have a right to ask for is, hey, just a reason to believe, just a reason to hope, just a reason to think that, you know what, maybe 2025 could be better than what it was in 2024. And I thought there was enough from G-Day on Saturday to make that hope justified. Nothing's guaranteed because nothing ever will be. But if you want to have a belief that this offense could be upgraded in this upcoming fall, the presence of some new wide receivers or kind of a wide receiver you're somewhat familiar with, kind of in a sort of full season role, I think these wide receivers provided that for you on Saturday. And I think that was the main takeaway from G-Day. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We are happy that you are with us here today. No matter how you get to us, it's live on video, and I love that word, live. We weren't fully live last week. We were partially live, but we are all the way live here right now. Isn't that a great thing? Radio Noon, Athens Sports Radio 960. We have podcasts wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just so glad to have you with us, and so thankful to our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia who make this show possible. It takes a great sponsor to make the show work the way that it does, and I'm so proud of everything we were able to do for you on Saturday in terms of delivering that G-Day coverage, the fact that we continue that for you here today. It takes resources to make this happen. Pella Window and Door of Georgia provides those resources for us here today, and they are a great resource for you, too, when it's time to upgrade your windows and take advantage of the terrific window technology that exists now. It's going to make your home feel better on the inside, look better on the outside. And if you want to learn more about this, you get a chance to interact with Pella out in public here in the very near future. They're going to be at the Flowery Branch Spring Festival along with the Chamblee Arts Festival this weekend. Now, the Flowery Branch Spring Festival is going to be a one-day event taking place on April 19th. By the way, shout out to the folks in Flowery Branch, very, very close to where I grew up. And the Chamblee Art Festival is going to be Saturday and Sunday, April 19th, 20th. It's a great time to be outside. Everybody's having a good time with that. And I want you to come out and say hello to our folks there at Pella because it's a great way to sort of put your hands on the product, to sort of feel it, recognize what makes it different, and really get the understanding of why when it comes to windows, they're Energy Star approved. That means that's going to save you perhaps some money on your energy bills, but it's also going to make the home look better on the outside. That improved curb appeal could kind of impact your resale value, things like that. Always really good stuff when it comes to our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Also, for right now, you can get $750 off your project and 0% APR for 36 months. So great savings. Find out more online, PellaGA.com/DawgNation. That's PellaGA.com/DawgNation. Or give them a call, 678-638-1429. 678-638-1429. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is going beyond. Okay, we can bring the music down now. We got Jon Stinchcomb here coming up in a little bit. We'll talk more about G-Day with Jon, kind of how we as fans should interpret what it was that we saw. Prior to that, though, let's go around the DawgHouse, and it's poured today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. By the way, Dr. Pepper going to be a big part of our Dog Nation cruise coming up next week. We're excited about that. Such a great time here for Dog Nation. So many great things going on. Can't wait to hang out with Jonathan and the entire crew from Dr. Pepper next week on board Utopia of the Seas. That is going to be a lot of fun. All right. So I want to talk about something else from G-Day on Saturday, kind of the culmination of what has been a spring-long theme from Kirby about what it is that he's looking for from his team and from his players. And it's a question about a couple of guys that we think are very good for Georgia and in line to be even better, linebackers Chris Cole, Justin Williams. And in talking about both Cole and Williams, Kirby kind of pivots beyond that to why these two players embody the larger theme and the larger, I guess, mission that Georgia's seeking to accomplish here this season. And I think this is really important because not only does it tell us something about what we might see from Georgia in 2025, if we're being honest, I think this also helps explain a few things about Georgia from 2024. So take a listen. The question is, hey, what do you like about Chris Cole and Justin Williams? And Kirby uses that question as a platform to talk about something much larger than just two linebackers. Here is Kirby.
Yeah, I'm excited about Justin and Chris. I'll tell you that there's not two players on our team that play with more fire, passion, and energy, and we talk about it all the time. Fire, passion, show me your fire, passion, and energy. They were having fun on the field. They enjoy each other. They compete. They love the game of football. So if there's anybody out there that's playing high school football that has fire, passion, and energy and just loves the game, we got a spot for you. Just come to Georgia. We'll find a way to get you there, and, you know, fire, passion, and energy pays off. It's not the ratings or the stars or all those things. It really isn't. It's just the kids that want to play the game the most right now, and those are the ones that play the best, and those two guys personify that.
I think that's really interesting from Kirby Smart, especially when he says those that have the fire, passion, and energy will be the ones that play the best. Now, obviously there's a requisite talent level required to play at Georgia, no matter how many stars you have. There are some size specs and some athletic abilities that you must possess. Otherwise, Georgia's simply not going to be interested in you. That's obviously true, but within the category of elite athlete, who is it that has fire, passion, and energy? Those are the players that Kirby Smart says can thrive at Georgia. And he has harped on that a lot this spring. I think we take that seriously. And, you know, one of the things, you know, given the fact that we have a very large platform here, one of the things I do try to be really careful about is I can't come in here, sit in the chair, and rampantly and recklessly speculate too much. Every now and then, a little speculation is probably okay, especially sometimes when it relates to things outside of Georgia football. We'll speculate about some other teams. We try not to recklessly speculate about Georgia too much. We try to use some sort of, like, whether it be empirical data or hardened, you know, proven facts. We try to lean on those type of things for our opinions for the most part. But I'm going to kind of sort of break with that protocol to speculate here at least just a little bit. I think it is, and this is mostly an educated guess, but some speculation mixed in here. I think it's fair to assume that if Kirby Smart is hammering, we've got to have fire, passion, and energy. Got to have fire, passion, and energy. Got to have fire, passion, and energy. If he's saying that's what we have to have in 2025, I think it's fair to assume, even though it requires some speculation, I think it's fair to assume there wasn't enough of that in 2024. And furthermore, I think it would be wrong to blame that on any one player, because the fact is, you know, Carson Beck was the high-profile quarterback. Everybody sort of knows his NIL story. Everybody sort of knows how he left. Everybody sort of seems to recognize the rift that created. And it's very easy on the way out the door to say, hey, you know, Carson Beck killed the mood for the entire team. I don't know that Beck positively contributed to Georgia's culture a year ago, but I don't think that Beck was the sole reason why that perhaps Georgia didn't have enough fire, passion, and energy. But either way, now that 2025 G-Day has occurred, 2024 truly is a past tense conversation. It's probably best left in the past now, no matter what the real reason was and how pervasive the lack of fire, passion, and energy might have been. Finding out how you conjure more of that for 2025 is probably a more worthwhile discussion. And I know even for like hardcore Kirby believers, the repetitive phrasing probably gets a little tiring sometimes, but leaders are repeaters. And repeating this phrase over and over again is just a tried and true method for reminding everyone of how important this will be to the organization. And that's what Kirby Smart's choosing to do. And if you're a Georgia fan ready to feel good about your team here for this year, in addition to whatever you might have seen about the wide receivers and anything else, the fact that there is a stated goal of just playing with more passion, playing with more fire. Kirby Smart later on in the press conference said, I want to see a bonfire, not a bunch of individual little kindlings and sparks, you know, to go back to your vacation Bible school days of, what was the song? Pass It On. Not that type of thing, but one big bonfire that everybody's burning here in the same direction. That's a version of Georgia that I think could be pretty fun. And the fact that they're pushing that way so hard right now, I think that speaks pretty well to what might go down here. Okay, so at this point, let me say that's Around the DawgHouse, presented today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. Also, before I shout them out, let me remind you, there is still so much more from G-Day. Dominic Kelly got an interception. That was kind of interesting. We haven't really done a ton yet on the individual quarterback performances, what we see from the defense overall. Trust me, it's going to take us a week to do all of this. We can't give everything in its full measure in just one day, but we will do more of this with Jon Stinchcomb here in a moment. Prior to that, though, as I said, Dr. Pepper brings Around the DawgHouse to us. We love Dr. Pepper. They're going to be on board Utopia the Seas with us next week. That's going to be a lot of fun. And as I'm, like yesterday is another example of this, very busy family life, which I'm grateful for. I don't want to lay around and do nothing. I want to be out and about and doing things. But we had to go do baseball in the morning. And then, you come home in the afternoon, get a chance to watch a little bit of the Masters. And as I'm sitting down to get ready to watch that, sitting down on the back deck to watch a little TV, you better believe the ice cold, delicious, one-of-a-kind flavor of Dr. Pepper's coming right out there with me, because that's the way I just kind of enjoy my weekend. Weather's nice, enjoy a little Dr. Pepper, need a little treat after being gone all day long, and trying to watch a little TV and enjoy some golf. For me, that means including a little Dr. Pepper. So as you're shopping at your local Kroger, wherever you're picking up your groceries, get some Dr. Pepper. Maybe you'll even want to try the brand new Dr. Pepper Blackberry. Dr. Pepper Blackberry Zero Sugar. Fun new flavor innovation from our friends at Dr. Pepper. It's worth giving that a try right now. So we're so happy to have Dr. Pepper as part of Around the DawgHouse here today on DawgNation Daily. And we would invite you to try all of the flavors of Dr. Pepper here today. Okay, before we're done, I try not to be very self-serving. This show really isn't about me. The show is about Georgia football. That's one of the probably secrets to our success, is that the star of this show has kind of always been the content, not the person who's speaking to the microphone. But before the show is done, we are going to talk about me just a little bit, because I got a chance to do something on Saturday that, as somebody who grew up watching a lot of TV, I have not gotten to do very much in my career. Mixed reviews for the performance. So we'll let you. Some people very positive. I will have to say, my ego was gratified to hear some kind of positive reviews. Others, perhaps good-natured critique. So our Kaylee Manziel going to step in here and kind of judge a performance from me on something on the weekend. So we'll give you that here before we're done. But for now, everything from G-Day, and oh yeah, by the way, we got to get to this eventually. The hot topic involving Nico Iamaleava and what this means for college football's future, what it means for the future of one of Georgia's rivals and biggest road games of the upcoming season. Let's cover all of that and more today with Jon Stinchcomb here today, DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Let's hello to Jon Stinchcomb. Always love having him a part of the program. A lot to react to that we've learned from Georgia over the course of the last couple of days. Jon, let me start with this, though I was just discussing it. If Kirby Smart spends an entire spring harping on playing with fire, passion, and energy, do you think it's fair to assume then, looking back on 2024, that was a key takeaway for the coaching staff, that somehow, some way, this team just didn't play with enough fire, passion, and energy, and that might have been a possible reason that the end-of-season results were a little short of what the beginning of the season expectations were?
Yeah, it doesn't take a wild leap to connect those dots. And you look at it, the seasons are longer, and it is a war of attrition. So coming in, that you've got to try to keep it as close as in the red as you possibly can for as long as you can. And with a young team, and all of them are at this point with as much turnover, but Georgia specifically, guys that have either transferred out or left the NFL, you're going to rely on a lot of young guys. And the way to make up for mistakes and maybe not that fine polish that you get with fourth and fifth year guys is you bring a lot of fire, you bring a lot of passion, you bring a lot of energy, and that lifts all ships. And I think that's a great mantra for any team, but is there any correlation from what we saw last year to what they know needs to be a point of emphasis this year? Absolutely. I know this, if you're going to only present, these are our core values once, and that's the last time you talk about them, they are not your core values. They just go and die by the wayside. But the fact that it's repeated, the fact that it's almost a war cry at this point in the year, I think is an emphasis that for Georgia to be successful, they've identified fire, passion, and energy as something that needs to be defining characteristics for this team.
So I started the show today by talking about what I thought was a pretty big positive takeaway from G-Day. I thought there's a chance this receiving core really is major upgrade from what it was a year ago, and I'm going to include the tight ends in that discussion too. Pass catchers overall, they just may be better, and that's good news for Georgia. But to kind of be somewhat fair and balanced, I do want to give some additional context here. The game got more entertaining as it went along. It did start a little slow, and just if you want to try to be as fair and balanced as we possibly can, the question that's going to come up there is, okay, well, is that a echo of slow starts from real games back in the fall of 2024? So I'm going to ask you, as someone who played in G-Day and played in a lot of other games, would it be concerning for you that what was perhaps the major issue among a few for Georgia from 2024 at least seemingly replicated itself on Saturday? How significant would that be for you?
Yeah, don't look too much into G-Day. G-Day is fun. It's a great opportunity to compete one more time before all you get to do between now and late July is lift weights and run. So one last time to put the helmet and shoulder pads on before you go to training camp. So there's a lot you can get from it, but don't read too much into it. When you throw the ball 90 times, by the end of the day, you should have some good statistics across the board. I mean, there should be some good numbers. And there are, but 88 pass attempts, and you come away going, oh, that's 500 plus yards of offense and however many touchdowns through the air. I do think there is an increased level of talent in the wide receiver room. I think it would be hard for any team to match the number of drops that we had last year. So that should be a category that improves, and that sustains drives. You look at the number of drives this past season that were cut short and killed because we drop a pass and it was third down, and that would have moved the chains, and all of a sudden defense is back on the field. That hurts the overall effectiveness of your offense. So there are a couple contributing factors that I think would lead anyone to say this year should be better offensively. And one, increased level of talent, not to throw too much shade on the guys in that room, but I think you bring in a lot of young talent and find some guys in the transfer portal that can help. And statistically, let's hope that we don't get anywhere close to the number of drops that we had this past season. So I do expect an increased level of performance. I think that was somewhat echoed in G-Day, but then again, G-Day, we always come away with one or two names, like a walk-on running back that looks really good and fans are fired up for, and he amounts to a good practice player for us when the regular season rolls around. So a couple nuggets that you can find, but I wouldn't take away too many overarching themes that carry over into the season.
So putting yourself back in the position of being a player, especially as a veteran player looking at younger players than you kind of doing this the first time, a lot of people realize that G-Day and all spring games are your 15th spring practice. In other words, you could choose to use that practice however you wanted to. Historically, it's been chosen to be used as a game. When you watched young players who had been doing football behind closed doors in a practice environment, now doing it in front of a crowd, Did you see a difference in those performances oftentimes? In other words, I think the thing that those of us who are pro spring game hope is, hey, the challenge of now being observed while doing it, getting some attention for how you perform, that's at least a little bit of a, kind of a training wheel, if you want to, for what's going to happen in the fall. Did you notice that sort of thing when you were a player that, hey, for guys who may have been, doing well in the practice field when nobody's watching, that if they were playing in that triple-decker stadium for the first time after coming out of high school or something like that, all of a sudden that was just a little bit of a different environment? What kind of experience did you have watching your fellow teammates go through that when you were playing in Georgia?
Yeah, not only did I watch it, but I
lived it. So, as a younger player, I was a redshirt freshman at one time going up against Richard Seymour and Marcus Stroud. And to think that, their energy level and going into that G-Day matched mine is like my first opportunity to kind of show, hey, I'm a starter now. There's fans in the stands. Did it mean more to me as a younger player? Yeah, it absolutely did. Whereas later on, you're still trying to get something from practice. You're not dogging it, but you don't bring that same level of juice that you do and the energy that you find as a young player that's still got a lot to prove. And so I think that's reflected. They try to make them somewhat fun. I think we saw a couple of those trick plays that gets the fans engaged, but that passion, fire, and energy, especially for a young player for the first time, but playing between the hedges, could you see an increased level of competitiveness? Yes. And, sometimes you can generate that and manufacture it during a regular practice, but I think putting fans in the stands, playing in the stadium, and a similar idea of trying to play at that top level when early on in spring ball, you move practice into Sanford Stadium. Should it be any different? No, it's still 100 yards long and 53 yards wide, but yet you do see an increase in change in that level of intensity. And I think that's the hopes and desires for all those involved when you move the game or still have a G-Day, which is the equivalent of any other scrimmage, except for the fact that fans get to see it. So you're hoping that does add a little spark and does add a little energy. And I think it really does. It reflects itself in the play of some of those younger players that, they do try to bring a little more juice. And with that, BA, sometimes you lose focus and technique kind of goes by the wayside. So I think as an older player, you learn to harness that energy. You learn to harness that fire that you feel and still play within the techniques and the schemes that you've been taught. And that's a great opportunity and exposure for younger guys to kind of look back and go, oh man, I let these things slide in an environment that won't cost you as much. Because if the first time you're playing in front of a crowd that size or bigger, hopefully much, much bigger, is during the regular season, you can let those kind of cracks in the foundation show at the wrong time. So hopefully you can get those out of the way early on.
I want to ask you about the Nico Iamaleava situation here in a moment. But before we get to that, another quarterback, more important to our audience perhaps, any statement on Gunnar Stockton after Saturday? I think he confirmed the fact that he's essentially all but entrenched as the starting quarterback. Not to say that Ryan Puglisi didn't have some moments, and other quarterbacks, had their time. They kind of looked okay too. Coulter Ginn threw a touchdown. Got a chance to see Hezekiah Melender play a little bit too. But this is clearly Gunnar Stockton's team with Ryan Puglisi waiting in the wings. How about a takeaway from the quarterback situation? Once again, with the backdrop of everything you've been saying about needed context for what is obviously not truly a real game.
Yeah, I think it's a great step
forward for both quarterbacks. You want to see them develop. It needs to be somewhat competitive. I think we've seen that in the past with other starters that come back and may not have that number two nipping at their heels, and you see a drop or a flatlining of their performance instead of an increased level in just execution. And for Gunnar's development, I think it's good that Puglisi is one of those guys that he can throw the ball. He flashed as well. And it's a matter of consistency, whether it's a defensive back, an offensive lineman, or quarterback. The way you're judged is, yes, we need to see those, marquee plays, but we also need to see that consistency, play in, play out, get us in the right situation, make the right throws. Sometimes a check down or a throwaway is the right decision, and we need to be able to get that from you. So for Gunner, I thought from all the reports that I heard leading into G-Day, he had a good camp and continues to develop as he should, is a guy who is still looking for those starting opportunities and should be the guy. He's been a part of the program a while now. So it's no surprise that he is at the point that he is in his development and should be ready when the fall comes around to lead this team into the season. So I think it's a testament for not only the coaches and Gunner's development, but I am continued to be encouraged by both of those players as they develop. And, Puglisi's, his case to be the starter is not closed. But I agree with the assessment that it's Gunner's to lose, or for someone to just shine so bright that they take it. And I think that's Ryan's hope. It should be what he's shooting for, and then let the chips fall where they may.
All right, I want to ask you about Nico Iamaleava. I think this is the biggest college football story so far in 2025. I'm going to talk more about this in a moment. I believe this could potentially be catalyst for some real change, and I believe change for the better. I'm going to explain more about why I feel that way. But let me just sort of start big picture on this. What do you make of the fact that, if you listen to what Josh Heupel said, on Friday, hey, we thank Nico for everything he did, but we're moving in a different direction now. John, it sort of sounds like what athletic directors have said when they have moved on from coaches. I don't think it's incorrect to say, for the first time I can realize in a very public way, a college football player got fired. Nico Iamaleava skipped practice on Friday, and Tennessee fired him for it. And I think that's a really big deal. I really do. And it's not obvious all the dominoes that will fall because of this. But boy, we're about to see a very interesting chain reaction. What did you make of what went down?
Yeah, welcome to professional sports at the collegiate level. And that's kind of this, it's a microcosm of a much bigger picture. I think you see it in the NFL and have for years, where conduct detrimental to a team or performance-based or what's happening behind closed doors, which I think is probably much more of the case in this situation, plays out on the national scale. And I think this is only the tip of the iceberg of what's to come in really college football, because these types of business decisions is what's best for our organization. That used to not really be a part of the conversation, but now we're talking about real dollars, real money, and the ability for not only players to transfer, but for teams to make these type of decisions of going, we didn't commit to you like you don't commit to us for these 4 years. So I think it was a little bit eye-opening, not knowing all of the backstory that goes into this. But I think you're exactly right in your assessment. You hear the vernacular that Coach Heupel's using. It's very similar to any other professional sport, and also similar to what ADs say about coaches, which are hired positions. It's just new to all of us hearing that type of verbiage and description for a college player when you're talking about, appreciate your services and now we're parting ways.
Let me ask you a question, and I apologize for not remembering this. My memory just gets faulty after a while. When you were in the NFL, were you ever a part of, as a member of the Players Association, were you ever a part of like a work stoppage or a near work stoppage or a contentious labor dispute? It seems like you probably would have been. I just don't remember very well. Were you ever part of anything like that?
Yeah, so I was a player rep for New Orleans in 2010 during CBA negotiations, and we were locked out for a few months leading into the season. So, yes.
So I want to ask you this, and as someone who has like legitimate real-world experience in this, your opinion may be different, and that's why I'm asking you. As someone who, and I know you were too, I was alive during the 1994 Major League Baseball strike, which was, if you're too young to know that, it's just hard to understand how big of a deal that was. Such a big deal. And so that to me is sort of the lens that I sort of view every labor situation in sports we've seen after that. Here is what my sense of this sort of stuff is that the players, whether they be NFL players or major league players, like think about Tom Glavine, who was the full major league, sort of the face of the player side in the 94 strike. The players have always tried to curry sort of public favor because, after all, they're battling billionaires for dollars they think they deserve. And rightly or wrongly, the players have never been successful at fully getting the public on their side. Whereas, it ought to be, well, the players, the ones out there making the money, the billionaires are being greedy, and that may be accurate, but the public has just never really bought that as an idea. It's more along the lines of millionaires versus billionaires, wake me when it's over, I don't really care, just tell me when the games come back. That as someone who is in this role, and perhaps your opinion is different, that getting the public on the player side, battling the so-called greedy owners, has just never really been all that successful of an endeavor for any of the players who've tried to do it. Would you say that's accurate or not?
Yes, I think the messaging is a big piece of it. I think, whether it's the NCAA or the NFL, their messaging has always resonated more with fans. And I think part of it is, as a player, there's a number of people that picture themselves in that role. And there are so many folks that are saying, I would do this for free. I just love the game. I would. Now, they're not in that same situation. They didn't get those opportunities. So whether or not that's true doesn't matter. It's inconsequential. The fact that they think they would be in that situation and not fight for those same benefits is the driving force in those conversations. Now, with that said, I think one of the biggest issues and biggest differentiating factors between football and all other sports, when you talk about these kind of negotiations and usually not so much lockouts, but strikes, the players saying we're not going to play until, is baseball careers are longer. These guys play much longer than NFL guys. And when we had those conversations of, who is willing to, miss a couple paychecks or miss a season, well, that's 25% of someone's career. That's 30% of someone's career. They're not willing to make that sacrifice so that someone else gets the benefit from, holding the line, if you will. And that's always the shortcoming. Whereas, the billionaires in those negotiations are like, yeah, it's going to hurt in the short term, but I plan on owning this team for a long time. And in the long run, I can absorb this short-term hit, whereas players are going, this isn't a short-term hit for me. This could be my last year or my first year or my only opportunity to get in the league, whereas if I miss it, that's costly. I think those same type conversations will be had when you start negotiating, and I think it's only a matter of time for collegiate players. I think we've already seen it, candidly, that post-COVID, when players in the Pacific Northwest were saying, hey, we're not going to play until our demands are met. And you look across the country and the SEC's playing football, Big Ten's playing football, and they're going, hey, you know what, maybe we will play. And it's like, well, that ship has sailed for some of them. So those are tough negotiations.
So the reason why I asked the question that I ask is because I think a remnant of that, if I'm correct in my appraisal, kind of shows up in this Nico thing too of, I think the public by and large is okay with players getting paid. That's not a super controversial thing. And frankly, a lot of people were sort of okay 30 years ago with like Trans Ams and, paper bags, and they just don't really care that much. I don't think people are scandalized by players getting paid above or below the table for the most part. But when somebody like Nico allegedly, and I think this is fairly, confirmed allegation, allegedly demands more money after being paid millions for not playing in 2023, playing, in a fairly mediocre fashion in 2024, I just think it's interesting that the public response to that is, go kick rocks. Get out of here with that. There is just clearly a public rejection of, who are you to ask for more money based on the way that you played in 2024? I'm not talking about Tennessee fans or like Tennessee haters either, like a lot of our audience would be. I'm talking about just college football observers in general of, there is something about a quarterback, holding a team hostage for more money when he didn't play particularly well after being paid millions previously. The public is just rejecting this by and large. And that, to me, I think is incredibly interesting, and perhaps for some, leaders in college athletics that maybe need to find their courage here a little bit and speak with a little bass in their voice about why their sport deserves to survive. Maybe this is the sort of thing that ought to be noticed.
Yeah, I do think there's margin
for fans. I do think they want players to be able to share in some of what college football has brought in financially. But you look at it, and again, there's that disconnect from, I would be willing to do this. I've actually, as a fan, I would be willing to play if given the opportunity. I see what you do. I think it needs to be rewarded. Now you've taken that too far. And that's the sentiment that's being reflected in the Nico situation, is folks are like, hold up, you've taken that way too far. You have been rewarded. You have been compensated far more than what you've brought to Tennessee or brought to your program or to the game in general. So it comes across as being greedy. And I think there's a sensitivity to fans wanting players to be able to tap in and
be rewarded for
what they've helped create in the college football landscape, but also like have some awareness and have some awareness that it's greedy. It comes across as super greedy, that you've gotten the opportunity to make millions collegiately and it's still not good enough for you. And so I think that's where fans are like, I'm with you. I'll rally beside you to a certain extent. And Nico has walked well past that line.
Jon, it's fascinating stuff. I appreciate your insight on all of it, and still plenty more to unpack about Georgia, with a little bit of G-Day evidence to kind of either verify or perhaps leave some unanswered questions about the team here this fall. We'll look forward to many weeks to come of doing all that with you. Thanks for your time here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you soon.
I always enjoy it. Look forward to talking more about some of these young athletes that are continuing to flash for Georgia. It seems, especially those linebackers, lots of talented guys that their futures are bright. So plenty to talk about. Look forward to more, BA.
No doubt about that, Jon. Go Dogs indeed. Good stuff.
Take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
There we go. Yeah, we'll get ready to go cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Perhaps no surprise, we'll talk more about Nico drama here in a moment. Prior to that, though, let's get ready to go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And last week with my family, we were on board Utopia of the Seas, had a great Royal Caribbean cruise. When I go on our DawgNation cruise, which I'm very thrilled to be able to do, I don't get a chance to take my family. They got school and stuff like that. And so spring break was really kind of our time to do that. And honestly, I really didn't think as a family we were going to take a Royal Caribbean cruise here this year, just because we just moved, we got a lot going on. But my wife kind of came to me a few weeks ago. She's like, I really want to do this. And so we made it happen. Our friend Jessica Slater, great travel agent, she helped us with it. I'll tell you, this is one of the reasons why I like, going on Royal Caribbean cruises, as corny as this is. I really like experiencing things that I can come back and tell you about, because I do truly believe this from the bottom of my heart, that you deserve a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation and you ought to take one here in 2025. And I'm going to tell you one of the things I noticed this past week that I thought was a lot of fun. We'll get into all kinds of stuff about some of this in this particular space. But I'm a big fan of the sort of classic cruise experience. I just like cruise traditions. And one of the great traditions, in Royal Caribbean is the Windjammer Buffet. It's like that great thing. You first step right when you get on the ship, you go up to the Windjammer Buffet, you have a great lunch, and just throughout the ship, people just love the all-you-can-eat buffet, the chance to experience so many great tasting foods and things like that. Well, listen, on board Utopia of the Seas last week, I got to tell you, as someone who's loved the Windjammer Buffet before, I think one of the really cool new things we're seeing from Utopia right now is a tremendous upgrade of what is being offered on this Windjammer Buffet. Like the very first lunch we had right when you got on the ship, they had this incredible tower of seafood available, lobster and crab and clams, mussels, all that kind of stuff. It's amazing. Array of seafood. Throughout the week, steak and all this delicious stuff. It's like, man, this is an incredible buffet experience. And it's just sort of a part of the value that you're provided as a part of a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. So we think you got to take one. Jessica Slater is the agent travel advisor we would trust to, she literally planned my Royal Caribbean Cruise vacations. I was on the phone with her several times over the course of the last couple of weeks. She's been the one planning our DawgNation cruise. And if you want to get to Perfect Day Coco Cay and experience all the fun stuff there, Jessica's the one to tell you how to get there. So give her a call. 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com, and she will plan your Royal Caribbean Cruise vacation the same way she planned mine for my family and the same way that she's planned for our DawgNation cruise here, too. Okay, so coming up in a couple of minutes, on Saturday, I got a chance to, and we can leave the music up, I'll turn the music down. On Saturday, I got a chance to do something I have not gotten a chance to do in my career very much. I sort of think of this sort of like real TV. I had a chance to do some highlights. You know, I grew up in the classic era of SportsCenter. Keith Olbermann, back when Olbermann was, you know, let me just not say it. Back when Olbermann was doing SportsCenter. Let me just sort of say it that way. Dan Patrick, Craig Kilborn, you remember him? Stuart Scott, you know, these legendary SportsCenter anchors. Got a chance to, you know, enjoy all that with them. And on Saturday, I got to have my chance to sort of do highlights the same way that you would have in sort of the classic era of SportsCenter. We're going to get to that in a moment. We're going to do that here coming up in just a little bit about, you know, kind of how that all went down. I'm going to let Kaylee Mansell judge because there have been kind of some mixed reviews here. So we're going to do some of that here in just a little bit. We're going to do some more of that. Prior to that, though, let me talk a little bit more about what we were discussing a moment ago, which is what I think is an incredibly fascinating situation involving Nico Iamaleava. Now, if you're only kind of partially aware of the details on this, let me kind of give you the full details here. So there had been rumors going back to Thursday. This is while I was out of town. Rumors going back to Thursday. Pete Nakos from On3 had this first, that the Nico camp was aggressively trying to renegotiate his deal with Tennessee, dating back to December when they were trying to do the same thing. I guess if you're familiar with Josh Pate from 24/7, I guess Pate has said that he was even considering holding out of the playoff game a year ago as a way of getting more money. So trying to be very aggressive, allegedly, not coming to any kind of agreement on that. And we don't have to play the music again. We can just let that go. We can turn that off. We can turn that off. So very aggressive on all of that. Not able to come to any kind of agreement. And it was sort of coming to a head last week. All of this finally shows up on Friday, where it's the practice right before the spring game. And Nico doesn't go to practice. And as a response to that, Josh Heupel, as I told to Jon Stinchcomb a moment ago, my description of this is he essentially fired him. That Nico was a no-show at practice, sort of AWOL. I don't believe they've spoken since then. It certainly seemed like he was no longer in Tennessee, perhaps moved back to California. And either Tennessee called Nico's bluff or they just flat out fired him. But Tennessee announced that it was moving on with Nico Iamaleava no longer as its quarterback. Nico's just done at Tennessee. And now the ball is in Nico's court about where he's going to go, and is this leveraged attempt at a power play going to result in more money for him? He's already paid millions in 2023, did not play essentially at all, was sort of paid to sit then, played at what I would say a mediocre level in 2024. I had him as about the median quarterback in the SEC last year. I think most people had him ranked even worse than that. Not a successful season. Tennessee was a good team. We would credit that success mostly to their running game and their defense. And we were very clear about this during the year that Nico Iamaleava just was not, he wasn't even the best quarterback in his own state. We would say that Diego Pavia from Vanderbilt was even better than Nico. So the idea that somehow on the basis of his play he deserved more money seemed like a fairly specious claim. Tennessee obviously agrees, and that's why Nico's no longer there. And transfer portal opens on Wednesday. It is not obvious to me what the market is going to be for Nico here. For somebody who believes he was underpaid at Tennessee, testing the market to find out his true value it's not obvious it's going to work out great. It seems like we're already hearing from some schools, I guess Deion Sanders, the most recent, who've said, no, we're actually fine with the quarterback we have. We're not going to be in the Nico Iamaleava business here. So could get very interesting as far as that goes. Now, from a Georgia perspective, here's what I believe. I don't think the loss of Nico changes very much for Tennessee at all. It's Georgia's first big game of the 2025 season. It's one of its biggest road games overall. If Nico's the quarterback for Tennessee, Georgia's probably a small favorite at Tennessee. I believe without Nico, Georgia will probably still be a small favorite at Tennessee. I don't think that Nico's value to Tennessee is like a full touchdown per game. I don't think that's probably what it was. A couple of points, perhaps at best. I believe that Josh Heupel, working with whatever quarterback Tennessee finds, including a couple of its on its own roster, is probably a better combination than Nico and whatever coach desperate enough to bring him in, he hitches his wagon to here at this late date. In fact, the fact of the matter is, Hendon Hooker was never thought to be a great quarterback prospect. Heupel got a lot out of him in 2022 that he's just shown the ability, especially when he's got good wide receivers, which maybe they do, maybe they don't. He's shown the ability to get something out of his offense in the past, even without an elite talent at the quarterback spot. He is a better coach than almost certainly whoever Nico's going to be playing for now at this late date. So I don't know how much this changes the fortunes for Tennessee here this year. They are probably on that rung just below Georgia, but they probably already were that to begin with. This may not have a huge impact on the field, I don't believe. I think that Tennessee is essentially still the same team with or without Nico. However, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on this, then we're going to move on and do something a lot more fun. I think there is the potential that this has major ramifications for college football overall. And I'm going to try to be very, very clear about this, so try to stick with me. We'll make this short and sweet and to the point, and hopefully we'll resolve something after this. I thought the key takeaway in this entire ordeal was, throughout the entire process, it seemed like the Nico Iamaleava camp was doing everything they could to keep their actions private. When Pete Nakos reported what he did for On 3, Nico's dad goes to social media, essentially called Nakos a liar. We now know that it was Nico's family that was seemingly lying about all of this. They were very aggressive and wanted to keep their actions private. On the other hand, Tennessee, throughout this entire ordeal, almost certainly they're the ones leaking every step of this. The fact that he wasn't at practice, the fact that he was, playing hardball, wanting $4 million, that number being reported by Chris Lowe from ESPN, that I would say pretty clearly coming from the Tennessee side here. It is very telling to me that Nico's camp wanted this private and Tennessee's camp seemingly wanted this public. What does that tell me? It tells me that Tennessee knew that it had the public on its side. As I told Jon Stinchcomb, in battles between so-called labor and management, the labor side's never that popular. No matter what the sports media tries to tell you, they love like cosplaying as like Norma Ray or whatever. The labor side's just never that popular, rightly or wrongly. The player's position is not that popular, even when they're battling against these evil billionaire owners. But in college football, there are no billionaire owners, at least not yet. And so, therefore, the player position in the public overall is going to be less popular. And I have no opinion about, at least that I'm willing to share, about whether I think that's right or wrong. This is not about right and wrong. This is about what is. This is about reality on reality's terms. The player side in this situation is just not that popular. The idea that a player who got paid $2 million not to play in 2023 now deserves a raise after playing poorly for the most part in 2024, that is just not a popular public opinion, which is why Tennessee wanted it public. Now, what does that mean going forward? I think it means this, that a lot of us have been, to use kind of a very online word, we've been sort of black-pilled into believing that nothing can happen for the better in college athletics, that it's all going to be this sort of slow, managed decline into oblivion until college football is essentially unrecognizable. In fact, because I was out of town last week, I went back and sort of listened to what a lot of people were saying before they knew that Tennessee was going to stand up and play a little hardball against Nico. And that was essentially the gist of the national reporting. A lot of people on Friday morning saying, well, if you're Tennessee, what are you going to do? You have to give in to the quarterback. You have to do whatever he wants. He's your quarterback. You've got no choice. And then when Tennessee stood up and said, actually, we do have a choice. Actually, we can just do things. And if we want to move on from this guy, we can just do things. We can just do this. And that's what they did. And all of a sudden, the tone of the reporting changed because all of a sudden a figure representing the sort of establishment in college athletics said, you know what, we're actually not going to get pushed around on this. We're actually not going to give in. We're actually going to sort of stand our ground and stand on something resembling principle. Now, listen, if you want to point out the only reason that Tennessee's in this mess is because they essentially violated NCAA rules a couple of years ago, I will grant you that. But let's just sort of keep it to the vacuum of this issue here for a moment. Now, what this leads to is this. And this is where it gets boring and tedious, and I apologize. But let me just say this real quick. Ross Dellinger on Sunday, I think it was, reported for Yahoo. Dellinger's a very good reporter. Ross Dellinger on Sunday for Yahoo reported.
Going back to the beginning of the game
guys, hold on.
here.
Can we hold on? Can we hold on this for a second here? Ross Dellinger reporting for Yahoo on Sunday said that there is a little bit of a feeling in Washington right now. We don't talk about Washington, D.C. on this show. We never really are. But in Washington, there's a little bit of a growing feeling that maybe if college athletics really wants it, maybe they could get something sort of resembling sort of an antitrust exemption, which, listen, your eyes gloss over. That sounds boring. That sounds tedious. Let me just sort of give you a parallel phrase for antitrust exemption. When people say antitrust exemption for college athletics, here is the way I think you should interpret that. That Washington, D.C. wants to give college athletics permission to establish some rules. Because what we've really had the last couple of years, it's not about players getting paid or even players transferring as much as it is there's just no rules. And every time the NCAA gets dragged to court, they lose because of what I believe is sort of an activist set of legal opinions. But however you want to describe all of this, that college athletics have been told now for a couple of years, you're not allowed to have any rules. And as you know, if you have no rules, you have no sport, whether it's checkers or college football, whatever else. That rules give shape to the sport. And college athletics have been basically told there are no rules. And one of the reasons why people have been so pessimistic about the future of college athletics is because there's just no seemingly, opportunity to kind of create some rules and then sort of stick by those rules. Kirby Smart even talked about that on Saturday a little bit when it comes to the response to the House settlement overall. That there are just no rules. But according to Dellinger, in Washington, there is a belief that maybe we could, quote unquote, save college athletics and that we could give some permission through kind of an antitrust exemption type situation to have some rules going forward. And the reason why that might be possible is because people in Washington, no matter which party it is, they're always going to respond to what the public wants. And when you watch the backlash against Nico and this Tennessee thing, it is obvious that the public is saying, enough. This has gone too far. This is out of control. The public is saying enough. And the people in Washington might be listening. And that might be an opportunity to save college sports. And that's why this Nico situation is perhaps such a big deal. And that is Cruising Around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. All right, now, putting that aside, let's get ready to have some fun here for a moment. All right, so on Saturday, we had G-Day. And G-Day was not on television. And we had a chance, because of that, to show a little bit in the way of highlights from some of this and give people a little bit of a chance to see what they were not able to see if they weren't in person there, which gave me a chance. Listen, I'm trying not to be too self-serving. I'm trying to do things like that too much. It gave me a chance to be kind of like the old school, era of Sports Center that I grew up with, chance to kind of do some highlights, describe what I was seeing. And I went back and watched. So I did these twice in the post-game show on Saturday. The first time I did the highlights, I wasn't too impressed. I felt like I was a little crutchy. I kept using, sort of crutchy phrasing a little bit. Sort of felt like the one thing I did not do, I never got behind. And that was like the one thing I did not want to do. So if you're doing these highlights, I did not want to get behind on the highlights. You grow up watching SportsCenter on TV. That's the one thing you learn, because I have no formal training for anything. I'm just some guy that talks into a microphone. The one thing you know from just watching TV is you can't get behind on the highlights. You gotta make sure you sort of stay with them. We did them for the second time. I thought the second time was far better. Now, I got a couple of very nice compliments. One Georgia fan said I sounded like Chris Berman doing the fastest 2 minutes in sports. So I got some nice compliments. Other people were like, maybe don't quit your day job. So here's what we're going to do. For those of you that missed the G-Day highlights, we're going to show you some of these. We're also going to show you my narration of those highlights. And then after that, Kaylee Mansell, a well-trained TV veteran, is going to get a chance to sort of share with me how she feels this highlight performance went. Now, if you're listening podcast and radio, obviously you can't see the highlights that I'm describing, but it is worth going to our DawgNation YouTube page and seeing this for yourself. So this is me from Saturday, getting a chance to sort of fulfill my dream of being a SportsCenter anchor, doing some G-Day highlights. Judge for yourself, some moments better than others, how well you think this went.
Yeah, going back to the beginning of the game here, we talked about a couple of nice catches for Lawson Lucky. You'll see that get started here from Gunnar Stockton, who makes a sharp throw across the middle of the field, and Lucky was able to haul that in. Looked like the Georgia offense was setting themselves up for success, but then Daniel Harris would prevent that, stepping in front of a pass here from Gunnar Stockton. Perhaps a little bit underthrown by Stockton, but an incredible play by Harris, and that was the only pick of the game for Gunnar Stockton, and a good play for Harris overall. Coming back first quarter, how about Jaden Riddell, another one of these tight ends who got involved. This would set up the Red team for the game's first points. It would be 3-0 Red after that. How about the second quarter? Landon Roldan for the black team, but he's going to be sniffed out and met right away by Elijah Griffin and Nasir Johnson. Georgia defense was looking very good early in this game. But then, of course, we've talked a lot about receivers. We talked a lot about the freshmen. How about C.J. Wiley coming up with a big catch for the black squad? And that would lead to a field goal. It was 3-3 at that point in time. Late first half, Zachariah Branch gets his only catch of the day, but it was a big one, going for 30-plus yards, and it would set up a first and goal at the 1 for Georgia. Right after that, Nate Frazier would run the ball into the end zone for a touchdown, first touchdown of the game. At that point in time, Red was leading 10-3. And we heard from Kirby Smart a moment ago talking about what he saw from Dominic Kelly on the interception. What did you see? Well, you're watching it right now. Kelly gets the pick on Ryan Puglisi, and that is how the first half would come to an end. Later on, Red team looked like Colby Young might have a touchdown. It was called that on the field in spring game fashion. You wonder if it might just stand just for the fun of it. But I believe it was Kirby Smart who actually, because there's no official replay, he kind of waved that off. That touchdown would not stand. But after that, you'd see a scoring play by the black team. London Humphreys, one of two today. This one coming from the third-string quarterback, the walk-on Coulter Ginn. Red team would respond, though, with Ryan Puglisi working for the red team with a beautiful touchdown catch by Colby Young, who did stay in bounds this time and may have made himself the most talked-about player of the day. Later in the third quarter, Gunnar Stockton going to a Jeremy Flight Bell, one of the best nicknames, one of the most athletic players in this team. Long touchdown throw from Stockton, which is everything Georgia fans wanted to see if they were lucky enough to be between the hedges here today. And then London Humphreys would come back again. Looks like a handoff, recorded as a pass because it's basically a forward pass, one of those jet sweep type plays. Second score of the game for London Humphreys. And then the scoring would conclude. Red team, Gunnar Stockton to Sokovie White, the pride of the former Cass Colonels. He gets the ball in the end zone, and that would be a second touchdown throw for Gunnar Stockton, and Georgia would get the 34-17 win. Georgia got the win, of course.
So there you go. That's my second of two readings of those highlights. Second time, the one you just saw, better than the first. The first time, not super confident sounding. It's one of those things where I was having to watch the highlights on my phone. Now, everybody's got a million excuses. So I was having to look at the shot sheet and the little screen, which is only about the size of a quarter on my phone. So I wasn't 100% sure of what I was looking at. Second time, just a little bit more confident sounding, maybe still a little bit crutchy. I used at that point in time as a sort of a crutchy phrase several times, something that I would try not to do in a normal cadence. But as I said before, I also got plenty of compliments from people online. They were nice enough to share those. I did not get behind while doing the highlights. And by the way, while my performance was slightly spotty, Cody Chaffins, who shot the video, could not have been more impressive. What an incredible job he did shooting the highlights. That could not have been better. Let me bring in Kaylee Mansell, a veteran of television. Kaylee, how did you feel the overall performance? This is the most we've ever talked about me on this show, by the way. Don't talk about myself very much. How did you feel I did on the highlights?
Well, first off, I don't know if I would call myself a veteran of television, so that was like a nice way to butter me up before you have to hear my critiques. What a win for Georgia. I think you hit that well at the end there. Good win for the Dogs.
Sure it was.
But it was funny because in watching it, and I've seen you do this for high school football before, but this felt like a mix of professional BA with the calls also mixed in with your personal inner monologue. You can hear your professional voice and then you cut to just how you sound on the show. So I thought that was a funny balance. I mean, you brought the energy and people don't understand how hard it is, especially when you're watching it on your phone. So you're trying to do that and look at your phone at the same time. It's not like you have a big monitor in front of you like you do now. I overall thought that your performance was really well done. It's hard to judge from the outside just how hard that is to do it. But, and I may be a little bit biased because you are my friend, I thought you did a wonderful job.
So it's one of those things, now I'll finish by saying this, is around here on the regular show, we work very hard. At least I do. I don't want it to be like a TV show, right? TV shows are stuffy. People are wearing suits and ties. That's not really what I want our show to be. I want it to be just people talking, and hopefully we've achieved that. I think we probably have. However, when I get to do something, if there's ever the threat of weather, I get to be like a weatherman, or if you get a chance to do some highlights or something like that. If we ever get to do something that's sort of cosplay as TV, boy, I just love that. I love every little part of that. And so from that standpoint, it was fun to be able to do that on Saturday.
I will say, though, after you come back on screen, you kind of looked like Rory at the Masters yesterday when he won. The weight of the world was finally lifted off your shoulders because you got through 3 minutes of highlights. So I thought it was really well done overall. Well,
I appreciate that, Kaylee. Good stuff. Thanks so much. And by the way, speaking of good stuff, let's also give a shout out to our friends at Cercheros. Don't know what they thought about the highlights overall, but if you're going to enjoy the delicious fresh mix from Cercheros, that's going to be a highlight for your week each and every time you enjoy. And if you're getting together to watch some sports here coming up or enjoy just some fun springtime weather, maybe a big Easter celebration coming up, you got a crowd of 10 or more people, getting that catered by our friends at Cercheros, always a great choice. You get take advantage of the online ordering. You can even get delivery in some cases if you want that. Whether it's the bowls, the quesadillas, the burritos, the tacos, nachos, so much more. They got 25 fresh toppings that make this Tex-Mex style food delicious every time you enjoy it. 30 locations all throughout Georgia, and there is more of that on the way. More of those locations coming in the very near future, too. So you can find out more online at Cercheros.com. That is Cercheros.com for a lot more on that. And also a shout-out to our friends at the Long Drink here, too. Finish Long Drink. Once again, we're outside a lot right now, maybe pool time coming up, working on my tan a little bit. You feel good about that. Well, as we're enjoying things outdoors this time of year, we're enjoying the Finish Long Drink, especially playing golf, stuff like that. Whether it's the peach-flavored version, the traditional blue can, the grapefruit flavor, the gin kick, Long Drink Strong, Long Drink Cranberry, Long Drink Zero, no carbs, no sugar. This is a great time to enjoy the Finish Long Drink. And if you go to thelongdrink.com, you can find out where you can pick some up today. It's online at thelongdrink.com. All right, so as we get ready to wrap things up here today, let me first of all tell you this. Tomorrow, it's just too busy with G-Day today. Tomorrow, we will announce the winner of our Golden Shoe Bracket Challenge. So if you are the winner, you may already know it, but the world will find out tomorrow. we're going to announce the winner of our Golden Shoe Bracket Challenge tomorrow during this space. So be here for that. For now, we'll do Golden Shoes themed around Saturday's G-Day, including Rob Phillips, who stopped by the UGA bookstore, said hello to us. He said, it's great to meet you, BA. Rob, I'd say it was great to meet you. Thank you so much for both showing up and then sharing some love on social media. We will give you a golden shoe for that. Of course, folks enjoy saying hello to me. Our buddy Andrew Sisson also enjoyed saying hello to Kaylee Manziel. He shared that picture of that. And by the way, speaking of Kaylee, correctly predicting the Masters winner, Rory McIlroy, she also picked the national champion too. So Kaylee's on a hot streak with her picks here right now. Andrew enjoyed his time with her, was kind enough to share that picture, so good stuff there. And then finally, our buddy Chris Smith here, who shared this. First of all, a wonderful picture there of a gorgeous pickup truck with the Georgia G, the flag, all that kind of stuff. That's great looking. It's even more significant when you realize, though, that Chris lives in Gainesville, Florida. So that gorgeous black pickup truck with all the Georgia ephemera driving around through Gainesville, Florida. How much do you love that? Sending a message in enemy territory. That is always an incredible thing. Great job by Chris, who also showed up as a part of our post-game show on Saturday. We'll give him a golden shoe there as well. By the way, speaking of the lousy, stinking Gators, boy, it's been a long time since they've had anything to brag about when it comes to Georgia. About 1,619 days for the lousy, stinking Gators. That's our Gator Hater Updater. They'll have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cooldown. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on all of that. They'll take good care of you here today. It is great to be back with you for our R.S. Andrews Cooldown here today. Johnny Prescott, by the way, was also at our post-game show on Saturday. He said he got a chance to meet Chris. Yeah, so I'll give you more insight here. One of the things I love is obviously I like my interaction with you, and I love it when you interact with me. But I especially like it when you guys interact with each other, become friends, things like that. It's those kind of bonds that end up being some of the most poignant ones, and I'm always very happy about all of that. So that's good stuff. DT, also kind words too, liking the picture of Andrew and Kaylee. Yeah, that was a really good thing to be able to see. A really good thing to be able to see. Let me get back over to YouTube here for a minute too. We'll see how folks are doing over there. We'll kind of react to anything from G-Day or anything else that's going on. Alan Hampton says, as any true Dog fan, I'm anti-orange and never pull for a team wearing that putrid color. I make an exception. I proclaim that Coach Heupel as a man of the hour. Yeah, I mean, look, I think that Alan is fair with what he says here, is that I do believe that Heupel's actions are commendable. If for no other reason than this sort of thing never happens in professional sports. Tennessee spent millions on Nico not to play, which in retrospect is a huge mistake. But what do we see in professional sports a lot of times? And in fact, we may be seeing this playing out the Atlanta Falcons and Kirk Cousins right now, is that teams are so hesitant to admit a mistake, it almost becomes like its own version of sort of like the sunk cost fallacy. They're so hesitant to admit a mistake, they end up making another mistake, trying to pretend the previous mistake wasn't a mistake. We see this. We see it in professional sports all the time. And Tennessee was set up for this to say, we're already into Nico for millions. At this point in time, if we're in for a penny, we got to be in for a pound. And they didn't do it. They said, no, we're not going to do this. So I would say that not only does this potentially kind of chart a path forward, for some, feckless leadership in college athletics to sort of stand up on their own 2 feet and say, if we want to fight, we can win. There is a pathway to victory here for college football to survive without having to take on a bunch of private equity money and without having to make, agents, kind of a twin pillar of power. There is a way to survive. There is a way to come out of this, but you're going to have to be willing to fight. Tennessee was willing to fight, and they won. It's going to take other people being, going to have to fight. But even beyond that, to simply admit we made a mistake, we paid the wrong guy. But we're not going to pay him anymore. Honestly, a lot of professional sports, true NFL type stuff, would do well to do the same thing. Jonathan Aaron asked me where my rumbling, bumbling, and stumbling line was, fully embodying the Chris Berman persona. Yeah, listen, I mean, Berman's still doing it, right? I mean, that's a guy who, he was on ESPN right around the time that I was born. And he's still on ESPN now. That's an amazing thing. Berman's also one of these guys, it's kind of amazing that public opinion has sort of completely come around on him. At one point in time, he was made fun of and, kind of treated pretty harshly. But now I would say he's mostly beloved. It's kind of interesting. He's just, if you just sort of do your thing without very much regard for what the public thinks about you, eventually the public just sort of learns to accept you. Frank Patterson says, the real implication of Nico leaving now is our Dogs won't have a tough game until we play Texas. So I don't quite think that's true. I really don't. Remember, we see this a lot of times when it comes to, because the only way to truly measure value is based on, like, say, point spreads. Anything else is just theoretical. I don't believe the absence of Nico Iamaleava changes the point spread for Georgia-Tennessee really at all. I really don't. I assume the starting quarterback for Tennessee won't be either George McIntyre or Jake Merklinger. But if it is, my assumption is that Tennessee is roughly going to be the same team that it was. I don't believe in the NFL, sometimes you'll see the very best quarterbacks, let's say if they get injured or unable to play, they are worth about 7 points to a point spread. There's no way Nico's worth that much to Tennessee. He just didn't play that well. He's just not worth that much to Tennessee. He's just not. He may be worth a couple of points to the spread, but maybe not even that. That if we think that Tennessee was in the sort of 8, 9 win, possibly 10 win range prior to Nico's departure, my guess is the Tennessee record somewhere between 8 and 10 wins without him. I really do think that's the case. I think that Heupel as a coach has proven more than Nico as a player. So if you had to take the player with a new coach or the coach with a new player, I think the safer bet is on the coach with a new player. And I say that knowing full well that's not what the audience necessarily wants to hear, but I do believe that's the case. That I think the ramifications for the Nico story are greater for the future of college athletics overall than it is for Tennessee in this given moment. Let's see what else. Let's see what else is going on. Road to the M2, also talking about Auburn and what they may be trying to do at quarterback with Jackson Arnold. And, I would say once again, this is sort of about the coaching staff you pair him with. I think that Hugh Freeze is a pretty good offensive coach. So let's kind of make this comparison moment. So McAleer from Washington State brings his offensive coordinator to Oklahoma. And, you talk about all the money that Carson Beck is allegedly making. One of the higher paid guys in the country we're led to believe is probably McAleer. Is it McAleer? Is that how you say his name? McAleer? Now at Oklahoma. But to me, this is sort of a classic example of oftentimes the teams most willing to spend big are the teams that are just sort of desperate. Brent Venables about to get fired. So you spend big on the quarterback, hoping that changes everything. And so if you're the quarterback, hey, that money spends well for you, but are you really attaching yourself to a very good situation? Because if you're a must-get for your team, then your team must not be very good. And that's potentially the case here. And unfortunately, I think that Nico may find this to be the case. And if I end up being wrong on this, y'all can cold take me. But it could be that the only market out there for Nico Iamaleava are teams like, say, UCLA, just really, really desperate teams and really tough situations where, hey, maybe they've got some NIL with nothing else to spend it on, so they give him millions. But you know what? You're going on year 3 without really showing the NFL scouts very much. You better save that money because it may be the only money you ever get. Michael Clayton says, what about Jaden Rashada to Tennessee? I think what Tennessee, if they want that third quarterback, which Heupel has made very clear they do, they probably want a quarterback with a little bit more experience than Rashada. I think Rashada is probably a group of 5 quarterback right now, unfortunately for him, which is not necessarily a bad thing either. I mean, that's still Division I. But I think that Jaden Rashada is probably a group of 5 quarterback. Let's see what else. Jonathan Aaron says, who has better quarterback play this year, Gamecocks or Gators? If I had to say, those would be 2 of the better quarterback teams, 2 of the better quarterback teams in the SEC. And, ultimately, I mean, listen, I think Lenore Sellers, the way he played in November, I don't know that anybody, DJ Lagway included, has played or could play about as well as he did. Now, coming back and matching that again, not always easy, but I'm a big believer in Lenore Sellers. Big believer in Lenore Sellers. All right, let's get some Facebook comments. Let's see what else. Alan Verbonchik says, do you think that Gunner can lead the Dogs to a national title? So I'm going to – the phrasing on that question is very interesting. Do you think that Gunner can lead Georgia to a national title? What I would say is I believe that Georgia can win a national championship with Gunner as its quarterback. Even Stetson Bennett, who was lauded and became a Heisman finalist and is now regarded as an all-time great, Stetson Bennett never led Georgia to a national championship. Stetson Bennett played well for Georgia along the way to a championship, but Georgia always had a lot more going on at quarterback than just Stetson Bennett. And we said this even when a whole bunch of people were like maligning Stetson and criticizing him. Our point was always is that Stetson is just one of the things going on for Georgia, that Georgia was not a really quarterback-led team. Because even in 2022, the sort of better year, for Bennett, the numbers he put up in 2022 were actually pretty similar to the numbers he put up in 2021. It's always weird that people seem to forget that. They're pretty close to the same numbers. But the point is that Bennett was very good for Georgia among many other things that were very good for Georgia. And so I think that while I don't think that Gunner Stockton and Stetson Bennett are the same player, I think they're going to have slightly different profiles. I do think the overall point of view is sort of the same thing here, is that Georgia can win the national championship in 2025. Gunner Stockton will be Georgia's starting quarterback barring injury, and so therefore Georgia can win that national championship, but they won't be led by quarterback to get there, because I do think that Georgia's trying to get back to sort of the more ensemble-style cast of what they had when they were at their best in 2021, 2022. Georgia has tried the quarterback lead us to a title template, and it did not work. That doesn't mean it wouldn't work going forward, but for now, you can understand why Georgia's ready to try something different, because being led by a quarterback didn't lead to very much for Georgia a year ago. Let's see what else. Ken Holcomb says that Josh Heupel did the right thing by showing him the door after investing a chunk of money and coaching in him. For him to come back and ask for more money is unacceptable. Don't let the door hit you. He says, I wish all coaches would do this. Yeah. I mean, I do think it was a necessary step in showing that it is possible. You don't just have to accept every single change that comes the way of college athletics. Throwing up your hand and saying we're just not allowed to have rules because, a fairly narrow sliver of, white-collar professionals with postgraduate degrees don't think college athletics is a worthwhile endeavor. You just don't have to do that. You can just do stuff. You can just fight back. And Tennessee, for now, has fought back. Now, they have fought back against an enemy of their own making. I totally grant that. But they fought back nonetheless. They really did. And I do think that can be a message going forward. Now, also, the real issue here is that in college athletics in the future, you cannot have a guy being paid millions of dollars not to play. You just can't. That sort of inefficiency is the kind of thing that's not going to stand. One way or another, that gets taken away. That is just the, you hear the word bubble sometimes. That is the bubble that is going to burst. There will always be well-paid college athletes. There always will be. There always probably has been. But there always will be. There always will be. But the idea we're going to pay so-and-so a 7-figure sum to stand there and watch because he's obviously not good enough to play, even against, in comparison to a quarterback that's, average at grits himself. Like that's the sort of, like if coaches want to maintain their control over the sport, those are the sort of monetary errors that can't be made in the future. They can't. Because if you are inefficient with your spending, in other words, if you're bringing in millions, but you're not distributing those millions in the wisest manner, then the coaches that have fairly close to like absolute power now over their programs, they're not going to have it moving forward. They're not. Someone's going to come and take that from them. Because we are moving into the allocation age when it comes to dollars. And that's not going to be pleasant for a lot of people. It's not. It's not, because there are a lot of players the last couple of years that have benefited from sort of a market inefficiency. There are a lot of players who've been overpaid the last couple of years. Not all of them have been, but some of them have been. But moving forward, you're just going to see less of that. Let's see what else. Dennis Wilson says, I bet Bama, Georgia, Ohio State try to figure out a sneaky way to get Nico. Yeah, I mean, A, he can't go in the SEC. The SEC prohibits that transfer. So wherever Nico goes is not going to be, in the SEC. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind here. Bill Sanders says that sort of ROI gets people fired, going back to the idea that you'd pay him $2 million not to play him. And I would say that, Georgia has probably had some guys, not necessarily quarterback, but I would say that Georgia's had some pretty expensive players not playing very much either. I would say that Georgia has not been immune to what I view as a fairly inefficient market right now. And that's one way or another, that's going to change. It just has to. Because, look, we all grew up in an age where when it came to a recruiting battle, the only thing that mattered is, did you get the player or not? That's the only thing that mattered. And if you didn't get the player, I used to say this all the time, there is no silver medal in recruiting. Nobody cares about your story if you finish second in a recruiting battle. Nobody cares. I don't know that's quite as true anymore. Let's use the example of Justice Terry. We've all heard some sort of figure for Justice Terry. Who knows what's real and what's not? Even some of the figures that are thrown around that are sort of treated as established facts. I have smart people tell me they don't know they're necessarily true either. So we still don't 100% know what is real and not when it comes to some of these NIL figures. But the exact dollar figure would matter in your evaluation. In other words, let's say Texas paid X dollars to get Justice Terry. Well, if you're a Georgia fan, you're like, we got to match that. We got to pay that money. We got to get this guy. Okay. In theory, let's say that Texas was willing to 5X that figure. Well, at that point in time, if you're a smart thinking Georgia fan, then you might have to say, good luck, young man. Hope Austin treats you well. Because all of a sudden now it's not just, do you like the player? It has to now be, do you like the player at this price? In the days of, I grew up a very big fan, and this way before my time, but my grandfather introduced me to it. I love the Twilight Zone. You ever watch the Twilight Zone, old series? There's that one episode where the kid is a monster and he's doing all these magical powers and just acting, terrorizing community. But the community is so afraid of the kid. They're like, it's good that you did that. It's good that you did that. Players have kind of grown up in an age where no matter what they've done, they've sort of been, oh, it's good that you did that. It's good that you did that. I think there's a different kind of narrative starting to form here around player behavior as it relates to money here too. Let's see what else. Gary Roach says, I hope you had an awesome vacation, BA. I didn't get to watch G-Day, but I saw some highlights and I'm excited about the season. Yeah, I would say that for the people who were there or got a chance to see our highlights, I would say the overall takeaway was people were pretty entertained by it. And I do think while not every question either was or could be answered, people for the most part were feeling pretty good about things, I think. And I did have a great vacation. I tell you, I just love that, I just love that time away with my family. I'm sure a lot of people feel this way. It's like, we got kids that are doing their stuff. My wife is busy. I'm busy. Sometimes we have to sort of get away to kind of deeply connect with each other. So I was glad we were able to do that. Garrison Tucker on DawgNation.com says, what position group impressed the most on Saturday? Pretty close to being linebacker for me because, Cole and Williams are very good. C.J. Allen is very good. Not breaking sports to say that Georgia's very deep at linebacker, but boy, they sure are good. Let's see. UJ Marine also says you can't blame kids for getting all they can. At the same time, kids need to have the, quote, right people around them to explain to them the decision, how it will change their future. Nico might get $4 million from UCLA, but where does he have a better chance of developing? Which also kind of speaks, Marine, to what I've heard here a little bit is that people are blaming Nico's family, who've been kind of to broker a bad deal. There just isn't. Now, there's this idea, well, if Nico just had professional representation, then maybe he could have gotten more money from Tennessee. But I'm here to tell you that that would be a bad deal for Tennessee to pay a quarterback substantially more money than he was already making when he isn't substantially better than he used to be. That would just be a bad deal. And this notion that, for a long time, all college athletics needed was the relationship between family and coach. And coaches were incentivized to do right by the families. Otherwise, other families wouldn't want to play for that coach. So the coaches had a great incentive to do right by the families. And the families had a great incentive to recognize what a good opportunity was. I would say it's the presence of some of this other stuff, agents, media who kind of use agents as their sole sources. There's a lot of that out there right now. And a lot of erroneous NIL reporting makes, in some cases, families more greedy than they otherwise would be. Because if you think so-and-so is getting twice as much as you, well, now you think you're underpaid. And when you get those dollar signs in your eyes, all of a sudden you start making reckless decisions. And, we may find out that's what the Iamaleava camp has done here. But I'm not going to blame the family for that. And I'm certainly not going to say that, a professional agent could have changed everything. As I mentioned a moment ago, there is no good way to broker a bad deal. DT on Jim Nantz. I like Jim Nantz a lot. I like Nantz a lot. I didn't love the very final call from Nantz on Sunday. He called it McElroy's masterpiece. That was really not a masterpiece round from McElroy, and really not even a masterpiece tournament. He had 4 double bogeys, became the first person to ever win a Masters after 4 double bogeys. So I thought masterpiece was the wrong word to use. And I know that Nantz sometimes is an easy punching bag for those online, but I'm also, I guess, the problem is I am somewhat corny and sentimental just like Jim Nantz is. So perhaps we're sort of cut from the same cloth in some respects. But I am a very big fan of Jim Nantz, a very big fan. And, largely speaking, and I'm not putting DT in this category, I'm just using DT's comment as a springboard. Largely speaking, whatever the social media mob is frothing over is usually idiotic, in my opinion. And Nantz slander is an example of that. Jim Nantz is one of the all-time greats to ever sit in one of those chairs. And the fact that Twitter, now called X, doesn't like him very much, I don't think that resonates with him at all, nor should it. Like I said, DT's not the one doing that. I'm just using this as an example that a lot of people don't like what they view as schmaltzy stuff from Nantz. But honestly, Jim Nantz describes sports the way that the majority of people actually view it. Watching the Masters makes you think of things that make you sentimental. The people that you used to watch the Masters with. The fact that people were watching the Masters before you're born. The fact that people will still be watching the Masters after you're dead. Like, that's sort of the way in which people view the Masters. that doesn't really fit very well into the very cynical race to see who can say the snarkiest thing. That doesn't fit very well into social media culture. But, I mean, there are going to be 10 or 15 million people that watched the Masters, yesterday. And I would say that most of them watched the Masters in a similar vein to the way in which Nance calls it. That's why he's so successful. Johnny Prescott also bring up the fact that Bryson DeChambeau mentioned the fact that Rory McIlroy did not speak to him yesterday. So I think that McIlroy's well within his rights not to speak to DeChambeau. I do. I think that DeChambeau is also well within his rights to say he didn't speak to me. In other words, both of these things are gamesmanship. Remember, it was DeChambeau versus Rory at the U.S. Open. It was DeChambeau and Rory here at the Masters. It's going to be DeChambeau and Rory again moving forward. So Rory choosing not to speak to DeChambeau, fair gamesmanship. DeChambeau kind of putting him on blast for doing so, I'd say is also fair gamesmanship, because the one thing that we saw from Rory, I'll turn this into a golf show, although I could do one. The one thing we saw from Rory is very well aware of what people think about him. Very well aware. And listen, I probably would be too. But when you watch, and CBS, the way in which they broadcast this yesterday, talk about a masterpiece, their handling of this was one of the great movies you'll ever see. And once the final putt was made, the fact they didn't speak, they just kept the camera on him and just followed him through the crowd as he was walking by the normal patrons and also the people that he knew. Like, all of this was so dramatic. And the face, the expression on Rory's face told the whole story. It was unbelievable TV. But it's also reflective of the fact that Rory knows every criticism he's received, both for how he's handled the PGA Tour Live split, for the fact that he had not won a major championship since 2014. He's very well at all of that. So if Rory's going to have the gamesmanship of not speaking to Bryson, if Bryson wants to plant a seed of Rory didn't talk to me, I would say all is fair in what might be a very fun rivalry for years going forward. All right. We're going to get ready to go. Let's see. Anything else before we go? Kent Holcomb calls it linebacker U. Yeah, I think it is for sure. Jacob O'Neill says Twitter is a wild place. And listen, for the most part, I like the wildness on Twitter. I think it's fun. It's my preferred social medium. But there are certain things that Twitter is in like unanimous agreement about that I just know for a fact are not true. Jonathan Aaron wondering if teams are going to be gun-shy with Nico. I think the thing that makes teams gun-shy with Nico is the same thing that made Tennessee not want to pay him. He is not that good. I'm not saying that, harshly in response to Jonathan. But the thing that's going to make teams gun-shy with Nico is if you bring in a quarterback, you want him to be good. Not just the starter on a good team, but a guy who is actually good. Because honestly, the teams that need quarterback right now, the teams that might be willing to make their starter a player who's only been on their campus for like a couple of months, they have less talent than Tennessee does. They don't have Tennessee's running back. They don't have Tennessee's defense. They're having to evaluate Nico on his own merits. That's the thing. Nico's not being blackballed here, if that's what ends up happening. Nico is being harshly evaluated, which is fair. Jill Burke on the G-Day turnout. Jill, we're going to probably talk more about that at some point in time, because on Saturday, I was not really wanting to go there in terms of making a big deal about the crowd being less than it's been before, but it was significantly less. And I guess I do have some thoughts on that. So, Jill, I probably should have maybe mentioned more about that on Saturday than I did, but people were in a good mood. I wanted to sort of stay in a good mood. That's what they ultimately ended up being about. All right, we have gone very long, but after not being here for a week, perhaps that was Jonathan Aaron says he met with all the players going forward because of his issues. Yeah, Jonathan, your question was a good one. I wasn't criticizing you at all. Your question was a good one. And I do think that the negotiation and how he handled that will factor into it a little bit. But I honestly meant what I said earlier. I think the biggest issue for Nico is there may be a limited number of teams who think he's a really good quarterback. And, anything related to like the negotiation, how that went down, is probably only magnified by are we sure this guy's actually good? That may still be the biggest issue. But yeah, your question, Jonathan, was a good one. I wasn't being critical of you. All right, we have got to go. Thanks for being here. Thanks to R.S. Andrews for making it all possible. Air conditioning, that's probably the main thing to talk about right now because it was cold last week while I was gone, but it's going to be warm again here in the very near future. And you want your air conditioning unit to be ready for it. So get it tuned up to factory fresh specs with our friends at R.S. Andrews. Find them online at rsandrews.com. That is rsandrews.com. They'll take care of plumbing emergency, air conditioning, electrical issues, any of that kind of stuff, those systems in your home, kind of behind the walls. They'll take care of all that for you. So find them online, rsandrews.com. You'll have a great day. Back tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you then.